It's ping pong. Where's Forrest Gump when you need him? McGinty goes up though and chases this one now. It's outside the 22, the ball bounces up, McGinty has it! Genius! Commentate, the Terminator is in! The United States take the lead! It's frenetic stuff from these two sides at minute 80. Aviva Stadium enjoying the action. There's Rams has it. Brendan Rams, I thought I'd seen it all. Rams for the line. There's no way he can go the distance. Oh, but he can cut back in. Gets it to Bowman. Bowman, the mullet man. Bowman for the line. One of the greatest tries you'll ever see from a front row forward. Chris Bowman, the mullet, has 5. On the ground.
Cutler's fine.
Big ruck by Magno. Diego Magno has turned it around. Kelly Colberg. Spike is in the corner. What a dive! Don't try that at home. Beck still going. Johnny Ryberg. Was he held? No, he wasn't. He's over.
Not held.
Nobody can stop the man that bench presses every single minute of every single day. He won't. Fires forward advantage. Penalty advantage as he peels around. Buster one. Still going for the line. Heroic stuff. The United States have defeated Scotland for the first time in history.
Welcome to episode 3 of Rugby Broadcasting. This is the final installment of the virtual sessions on rugby commentary offered by the legends at the Texas Rugby Union. I'm Dallen Stanford, and in this video I'll be answering questions from the rugby community about my experience in broadcasting, some technical aspects, some behind the scenes things, and maybe share a couple of laughs as well. My background in commentary began after retiring from playing for the USA Eagles for 3 years on the HSBC World Rugby 7 series. About 8 years ago, I got the opportunity to work at Infinity Park for the city of Glendale, Colorado, starting on the sideline and then moving to the booth. The scary thing was there's no school for rugby commentators. It's tricky to improve unless you do hard work by yourself and spend some time practicing outside of your broadcast hours and then learning, of course, from the commentators around you. I was fortunate enough to work with some of the best in the world, learning valuable techniques from every single one of them. My first experience was working on the HSBC World Rugby 7 series when I got to meet a living legend, Keith Quinn, the New Zealand commentator. He was pretty phenomenal. I was doing the second voice. He was doing the play-by-play, and he held his hand out to stop me talking when the try was being scored, to let the try breathe. And when he put his hand down, I knew it was my turn to come in and offer some analysis. And so that was a pretty old school way to do it, but it definitely taught me the way that each commentator has their role and their timing and when they should be talking and when they shouldn't, to make it sound clean, clear, and crisp. I take that lesson with me wherever I go as well. Over the years, I've had the chance to work on almost 50 internationals, 15 games, and 5 years on the HSBC World Rugby 7 series. I've done the World Rugby Under-20 Championship in Argentina, this Rugby World Cup 7s in San Francisco, the America's Rugby Championship for a few years, as well as Major League Rugby, the Pacific Nations Cup, and my personal highlight last year in Japan, the Rugby World Cup 2019. So let's get to the questions, my friends. I know you're firing away, shredding as they go. Okay, first one here from a good friend of mine, Todd Clever, aka Captain America. He's probably doing his hair right now as he's sending in this message. Favorite one-liner of all time? Let's think. One of the early one-liners that I came up with that I really enjoyed was, he's got more steps than the Great Wall of China. And that was Luke Hume stepping through, leaving some parked cars in his wake. Let me think. Another one would be, I know Johnny Ryberg, who just carved up Major League Rugby for the Colorado Raptors. He was just a machine on the field. And one of the lines that I enjoyed personally, and again, it's a matter of preference, he scored a try and I said, Mrs. Ryberg has sent me a Facebook request. I'm going to click accept. This is all true. She really did. She's on social media. She's a good laugh. The other lines, the Rugby World Cup lines, I really enjoyed. He's so scary, Freddy Krueger's nightmares about him. And those, it's important, I think, to bring a laugh into the commentary where you can. All right, Richard Collins from Dallas Jackals in Texas. Rich, my boychi. He says, where does all the energy come from? The energy comes from just being passionate about rugby, being a really excitable person. Every person who commentates any sports brings themselves to the game. And so some of the voices are absolutely brilliant that you hear, but they're more quiet and they're more solemn, if you will, in some of their broadcasting. Some sports allow for that, like golf, but rugby is an excitable sport. So I think it's important to bring that energy all the time and to deliver that if you can. Obviously, you strike a nice balance with your color commentator, with your analyst. So maybe they bring the level down a bit, you bring the level up, and you kind of work like that. Rich also says the difference between calling 15s and 7s. That's a good question. 15s is more, you can get into the game a bit easier because it's much longer, of course, and you also have only 2 teams playing. So you get the rhythm of the game as well. You get more familiar with the players as the game goes on. It's not as exciting personally, of course, than 7s, which is a lot of high scoring action. You got to have your lines ready, I suppose, and just your excitement. You also have to identify the players quickly, which is another challenge. So there are some stark differences in preparation for both. I enjoy calling either. 7s is really exciting because you get to go to amazing places around the world. So that certainly has that advantage. But there is nothing better than calling an international test match between 2 sides. The energy, the excitement, it really gets you up for the game. Okay, next we have, let's see here, Stefan van der Mava on LinkedIn. He says, do you practice announcing all the players' full names in advance as part of your preparation? Yes, 100%, Stefan. You have to practice their full names because you're going to be using it all the time. You need to be familiar with them. There are some very tricky names. I struggle with some of the Polynesian names. There are, Rugby World Cup, I had to do bloody 12 different countries. So they're Russian, Georgian, and a bunch of interesting different names. Obviously, the Afrikaans and South African names are easy for me with my background, but some of the Fijian names are very tricky. So I have to call a friend. I use my lifeline to find out how to say the players' names. But even in the heat of the moment, you're going to get them wrong at times. It's all about practicing and trying to deliver them in the best possible way. Follow-up question here from Stefan. Have you found a player coming off the bench that was a last-minute change, thereby not on your notes, Mr. No-Name Player? Yes, good point. So I have found that, particularly when you're doing some local national championships, or you're doing some domestic rugby, sometimes the players, come on a late change. I was doing a Major League Rugby game once, and the 8th man from the Houston SaberCats had changed, the player changed completely. So a different player, they're wearing a scrum cap there, you couldn't really see them properly. We were standing far away. So I did not know, and only half time did somebody tell me, oh, by the way, we've had a late change on the roster. It's now a different player's name. So I was calling the try scorer as somebody else. And then, yes, I had a player come on, we haven't had the right jersey numbers, and instead of calling the player's name, you just say brilliant stuff from whatever the team's name is. You kind of got to keep rolling with it. Rama Motadi, aka the car door extraordinaire, says, how do you manage not too much talking or talking too little during a game? That's a good point. Because I'm an excitable person and I like talking, that is, my role as a lead commentator is to talk when the play is live. So you cover the action when the ball is in the field of play and the action's going. So you take a break here and there, but you do want to narrate things that are going on. I suppose there's a fine balance between talking too much and not saying enough. I probably err on talking too much. And again, every commentator has their own style and their own preference, and every listener has their own preference as well. So that's a good question. Follow-up question, he says, how do you ensure great on-screen chemistry with whoever you're partnered with? That's another good point. Some commentators prefer to look at each other when they commentate so they can engage with each other and be more expressive with that. Other folks you have worked with over the years and you kind of develop that chemistry as you go. I think when it comes to something like the Sevens World Series, you're doing so many games with each other, tournaments back to back and around the world, you really can develop that a lot faster than in the 15-a-side game. But again, 15s, you've got a while, you can get used to each other during a single game. I think most of the good commentators are just easy to get on with, right? Because they've done it so many times, it's very familiar. It doesn't really matter who you're sitting next to. You can have chemistry from minute one. It's pretty easy to do with a lot of the professionals. All right, last few questions, let's go. Or some few flying in here. One is Holden Youngett from the Nola Gold in Major League Rugby, aka the Vampire, as he's well known, St. Mary's Gale legend. He says, how do you decide on your animal monikers for the players, like my teammate Nick Feeks, the mongoose? Holden, great question. I would say sometimes the play embodies the animal. Because I'm from Africa, there's so many wild animals running loose. It's easy for me to kind of think of one on the spot. Nick Feeks, the mongoose, well, he's very tall and he's always like looking above the action. His hair was two-tone colored as well. It really looked like a mongoose on the go. Very dangerous, very elusive. So that's kind of where they come up with. I also like to have fun on the broadcast, right? So not to keep things too serious all the time. Give somebody a little fun nickname if it's not shredding them completely, of course, but have a good time with it. Rich Collins, again from Dallas, says, what are the key elements you work on regularly to keep your announcing fresh? I work on trying to increase my vocabulary because it's important as a commentator to say things in different ways. That's always a challenge. I then also work on the laws of the game. They're changing and evolving every time. You've got to keep abreast with that. And I would say it's all about research. Researching your players, researching the referee, researching the history between the two teams, the stadium. That takes 3 to 4 days to prep for a 15-a-side game, and even longer sometimes for a sevens tournament because there are so many teams playing. So that's kind of how I keep it fresh. Colton Strickler, my man from Infinity Park at Glendale, the Colorado social media guru, he says, is there anyone that you model your broadcasting style after? As a youngster, I loved listening to Cliff Morgan, the Welsh commentator, of course, the Scottish legend Bill McLaren, and then Nigel Starmer-Smith from England. Just beautiful voices. I love the way they said things, they expressed themselves, and I love the excitement of a commentator like Willie Losey brings to the game. So I would say I probably learned a lot from those commentators in the past, and then, of course, all the ones I got a chance to work alongside, using a bit of each of their best attributes, if you will, adding your own personality in, and then you come up with something that's authentic to yourself. So each commentator, I would say, is a blend, of course, of all that, but of course they are themselves. Speaking of commentators, Rob Vickerman, former England Sevens captain, Sevens World Series star in the booth, current day nerd as well. How long did it take you to develop such a good eye for taking a picture? Nice one, Vickers. He's shredding me because of the lack of my own photos that appear on social media, but stuff I've just found online from another beautiful photographer. It's a great skill, Vickers. I will teach you someday, my friend. Rich Collins says, what's the biggest challenge outside the booth? That's a good question. There are a lot of things people don't see. People just hear the broadcast or they see the game. They don't necessarily know that there are other things that you have to deal with. So one of them, literally though, in the booth, each setup is different. So that's tricky just to have a good vantage point. Like in Singapore at the Sevens, we're in the stands, third level up. You can barely see the action, so it's really tough to be able to call the game there. But I'd say outside of the booth, you have a lot of friends that are at the tournaments and at the games that want to catch up and you want to see them, but sometimes you just have to say no because you have to rest your voice and you don't want to be out drinking. You don't want to sound tired when you're commentating a 3-day sevens tournament, right? So you have to keep that energy up. So I'd say that's definitely a tough part to tell people, actually, my voice is my asset and that's what I'm getting paid here to be, I would say the other side outside of it is the preparation, right? Getting familiar with the names. So if you're calling a sevens tournament, that's 28 teams. If the women and men are playing together, that's 400 players. And then, the stats changing from game to game. So it's epic, but it's a lot to keep up with. Rugbyfactory.tv, Rugby Factory, they have brilliant highlights online. They say, how do you prepare for a broadcast? What's preparation for a match 24 hours to kickoff? Another good question. I think I've dealt with that quite a lot, though, in episode 2. So check out episode 2 of the Rugby Broadcast. Robert McDowell, my co-host from the Rugby Hive, works with the women's sevens side and now in Mexico and now Canada. How do you prepare for commentating with the pronunciations? So the best thing for me and commentators as well is to ask somebody from that country how to say those players' names. So if Fiji are playing, I will call Tui Osborne, the Fijian sensation who I played with in the 7 series, and ask him, hey, send me a voice note recording so I can actually hear how people say it. Then I phonetically write it out. Sometimes I get it wrong. Most times, hopefully I get it right. And that's kind of how I go about it. Ryan Kirby, who is more active than Beyonce's Beehive on social media, he says here, I enjoy how you call the games, very professional. How do we get World Rugby to give you a chance to commentate the Olympics? Okay, good question. So the Olympics is actually not run by World Rugby. So that's the Olympic governing body choosing sometimes just 1 or 2 commentators to cover rugby, but then you'll maybe commentating other sports as well. That is definitely would be a dream come true, but I know that's only 1 or 2 roles. Well, only 1 role in play-by-play that gets filled for that. So maybe that's down the line. Who knows? So that's not really a World Rugby thing, but really been blessed with World Rugby giving me a chance at Rugby World Cups and those other things. All right, last 2 questions before we sign off. Brian Schnack, probably call him Schnack Attack. What challenges have you had in formalizing return to play for teams across your union? Anything that others like folks in the more lockdown geographies can learn from? So, Brian, that's not really a commentating question, I don't think, and I'm not in charge of any teams getting back together. Obviously, the bubble is working, as you see the Rugby Championship and the the Autumn Rugby Nations Cup together. Here in the US, a bit more tricky. We'll see how Major League Rugby manages that, especially with teams coming in and out, flying across the country. That's going to be tough to watch. Richard Collins, one more from you. It says, how does Verity put up with you? Shredded. Verity explains is definitely more popular than my commentary, so keep the change. Steve Watt, a.k.a. Frank the Tank, says, what's it like commentating South Africa or USA playing? Is it challenging to be objective? That's a good question, my friend. As a commentator, you have to give attention to both sides. You don't literally take sides, even if you're from one of the countries or played for one of the countries. So you've got to keep it even and keep it even keeled. I think sometimes if you listen to some games, I know some Australian friends, they get a bit biased sometimes commentating the Aussies play, the older commentators, not the current ones. So that's definitely a challenge. But for me, I just find that you call the game, you call it as you see it for both sides, and then it's kind of easy to keep the emotion out of it in terms of the team, because you're not really backing anybody. It's win or lose, it doesn't matter. You as a commentator. Taka Ngwenya, last question, says, favorite 15s match you've commentated of all time? Taku, my friend, I wish it was you rounding behind a banner like a parked car, but I wasn't on that game. I would say it was the USA-Scotland test match, the USA winning 30-29 in Houston, Texas. That was just epic to be involved in, such an upset. Also enjoyed Springboks v Canada at Rugby World Cup Japan. Be able to call, my country of birth, the Springboks, in a full international was just epic, unbelievable experience. I'll never forget that. All right, I think that's enough from me, the professional talker. So thanks for listening and watching. I hope that provided a bit of background into being a rugby commentator. Thank you to the Rugby Texas Unit for hosting me. Look forward to getting back in the booth very soon. Shut the gates, you sleek sensations, and keep the change.
It's ferocious. It's frenetic. And it's physical, of course, with Al Jabiri over the advantage line. Malifa again. Short ball! Look at that! Ridiculous!
Flat.
Who said Bigfoot was missing?
Flat pass, fellas.
Look. London, bit of space here for Goff, and now it's Muscles Ryberg on the outside. Johnny Beefcake. Ryberg gets a couple of fans. Ryberg! Johnny Ryberg! He doesn't have a photo of a loved one in his wallet. It's a photo of the gym. Luke White has another go. Luke White, he wants a salad. Look at that go, Crowder for the line. He's being chased all the way. The outstretched arm won't be enough. And BG, they've just robbed that like Bernie Madoff. Over they go. To Waka with a dummy. Beautiful stuff from Bodie Waka. Chips it for himself. It sits up. It's still going. Flicked in field. It's champagne rugby from the Free Jacks. Diving in is Liam Steele. And they'll be celebrating that one in the Cheers Bar in Boston.